Another objection to utilitarianism that Mill heard from some people is that utilitarianism is a selfish theory. Why would somebody think it's selfish? Well, isn't he just saying that a right action is one which brings you pleasure and a wrong action is one which brings you pain? And so you just consider your own pleasure and pain and you don't care about anybody else's? Now, this objection is just based on a pure misunderstanding. It's not your own pleasure and pain that are relevant to the rightness and wrongness of an action. It's the pleasure and pain of anybody who could possibly be affected. So we're just supposed to consider happiness and unhappiness generally, wherever they may occur. Um, it's not your own happiness and unhappiness. That's the only thing relevant. It's not just you and your peeps, not just you and your friends, not just people nearby to you. It's people anywhere in space and time that could be affected by your action. So you don't just consider your own interest when you evaluate an action for right or wrong, according to utilitarianism. Another objection that Mill heard was that he's setting the standard too high, that people can't always act with the intention of bringing about the most happiness. So is it too high a standard? Are we supposed to be going through our day just constantly calculating how we could bring about the most happiness by our actions? Are we supposed to constantly, in everything we do, be figuring out whether our action will, on the whole, cause happiness or cause unhappiness? Mill's answer to this is that my theory doesn't require anybody to have some particular motive. So no, you don't have to be going around constantly acting for the sake of bringing about the most good, in the sense of bringing about the most happiness. The theory makes motives irrelevant to rightness and wrongness, which is very interesting. So consider this example that Mill himself gives. He says, quote, "He who saves a fellow creature from drowning does what is morally right, whether his motive be duty or the hope of being paid for his trouble." So suppose you're out on a walk and you see a small child who's fallen into a shallow pond and is drowning. And the pond is only 3 feet deep. You could easily just jump right in and pull the child out. It's a toddler. Um, you might do it just because you think it's the right thing to do, just because you love humankind and you wish this poor toddler well. So just because you think it's the right thing to do, you jump in and save the child. That's one scenario. On the other hand, you might say, I maybe could get some money out of this. I bet his parents would give me $50, or maybe I could get my name in the newspaper, or maybe this would just impress the girls. So then you jump in and save the child the same way. What Mill says is that either action is right. Both those actions are equally right. It doesn't matter why you did it. The fact is that going in there and saving the toddler from drowning in 3 feet of water, on the whole, produced happiness, and so it was the right action. And just standing there and watching him drown for any motive whatever would be a wrong action. So it's interesting that his theory makes motives irrelevant. Okay, we're going to move on now to considering objections to Mill's theory. And before we do that, let's just recall what a thought experiment is. A thought experiment is a way that a philosopher tests a theory. We can't test our theories with test tubes and Bunsen burners and using instruments to observe things like microscopes and telescopes. So what we do is we imagine an actual or even just a merely possible situation which is a counterexample to the general claim. So a theory about right and wrong actions is supposed to tell us for any action that there is, or any action there could be, it's right just in case. In this case, in this theory, Mill says it brings about happiness on the whole. An action is wrong just in case it brings about unhappiness on the whole. So if we can come up with a counterexample to that general claim, that shows the theory to be false. The theory can't have any counterexamples and be true because it's a perfectly general theory. So the way that this kind of objection works is that some theory T says an action A would be wrong. Then we describe an action that would not be wrong, and yet the theory says it would be wrong. So therefore, we infer that the theory is false. So we're going to get pretty wild with our examples here, but this is part of what makes philosophy fun. And just keep in mind, the fact that these scenarios have not occurred, most of them, as far as we know, is not relevant. You don't want to say, oh, that's just a hypothetical, because they are hypotheticals, but they're possible circumstances. And a theory which tells us what right and wrong is will apply to all actual circumstances and also to all possible circumstances. So if the theory gives the wrong answer for even a possible circumstance, then the theory is just not true. Okay, so here's the first objection. Let's imagine that somebody puts on a television show called a torture show. And all the torture show is just one after the other, poor innocent victim getting tortured in horrible ways. You know, bamboo shoots under the fingernails, or maybe using some actual Al-Qaeda methods like in this picture, blowtorch to the skin, being electrocuted and hung from the ceiling. Now this sounds like a terrible thing to do, and indeed I think it is. But here's the point. We have to weigh the pleasure and the pain to decide whether this action of putting on the torture show is right or wrong. So let's pretend that we can measure them. Now, how much pain is involved? Well, quite a bit. Pretend like I'm making a bar graph here and say there's that much pain. I mean, it hurts to be tortured to death, to put it mildly. Now, if you and I were to watch a show like this, it would horrify us, and that would just increase the amount of pain, right? We'd say, oh my gosh, that poor victim. That is terrible. Where did the show come from anyway? But now suppose that somebody watches the show who is a sadist. Right? A sadist is somebody who enjoys inflicting pain on others, somebody who enjoys watching others suffer. Then they would get a certain amount of pleasure by viewing this show, right? Okay, now let's just imagine that only sadists watch the show and that millions of them watch the show. Maybe they only advertise this show in the Sadist Monthly magazine or to the Sadist Club. And so you have 1 million sadists watching the show and they love it. They're, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, do it more. Right? They're sickos. Maybe the occasional normal person also watches the show and they're horrified. So that increases the pain a bit in addition to the pain of the victims. But look, if we just add together enough viewers of the show who are sadistic, then this action of putting on the torture show will be right. So Mill's theory, if we have the numbers right, the number of viewers right, says that this would be a right action. Why? Because on the whole, it produces happiness. It produces pleasure, a lot more pleasure than pain. But the objection goes, oh, come on. You got to be kidding. Look, this wouldn't be right no matter how many viewers you got for the show. Even if you have a billion or 10 billion of them, even if this is causing massive pleasure throughout the universe, because everybody is a sadist, you want to say it still wouldn't be right, because you can't torture innocent victims to death just for kicks. Okay, so the theory seems to give the wrong answer here, and then the objection is, well, the theory is false. Let's look at another one. Second scenario to imagine is the inhospitable hospital. Now, we can do amazing things. We can improve the quality of people's lives in amazing ways using transplants. We can transplant eye lenses, hearts, lungs, skin, kidneys, and other things. The problem is there's always a lack of donors, right? Well, this is where the inhospitable hospital comes to the rescue. What they do here is every once in a while, when a person with a very minor problem comes into the hospital, like an ingrown toenail, they steal the person, and they just say, well, we don't know what happened to them. That's what they tell the family. They were here. They must have just got up and left. They steal the person away and kill them, and they harvest all of their body parts for spare parts. So say you go into the hospital because you have a sore throat, and they knock you out. They take you away, and they just carve you up like a turkey. But in doing that, they extend somebody's life by 10 years with your heart. And they make some other person able to breathe comfortably again. Actually, two people with each of your lungs. They save two dialysis patients with your kidneys. They give your skin to 10 different burn victims, which helps them to live a decent life. Okay, so let's just weigh the pleasure and pain. You might have, let's say, this much pain. Again, just imagining a kind of a bar graph. And you might have a lot more pleasure. Because, gosh, we've helped out, let's say, 20 different people. Not to mention your blood. We've prolonged and improved the lives of 20 different people. And look, it didn't cause you any pain because we just snuck up on you and killed you. Your family has a good amount of pain because they missed you and they never found out what happened to you. Okay, so according to Mill's theory, this is all right. This is all morally right to run the inhospitable hospital. But most of us want to say, no, that's not right. That action would be wrong. You can't harvest people's organs without their permission, even if on the whole that'll cause happiness. Okay, one more objection. A truthful, sincere compliment, compare that to a lying compliment. So suppose I tell this kid here that he's the best batter on the team, and he doesn't realize it's a lie, so that will just produce pleasure. He'll swell with pride when I tell him he's the best batter on the team. Now that's a complete lie. He's terrible. Look, the ball just went right past him. Or I could tell him he's the best fielder on the team, and maybe he is the best fielder on the team. He really goes after those ground balls and gets every one of them. Now, so I can cause an equal amount of pleasure with the sincere compliment or the lying compliment. Mill's theory just tells us that both actions are right. In fact, they're both right to the same degree because they cause the same amount of pleasure. But most of us want to say that the sincere compliment is better. I mean, isn't it intrinsically good to tell the truth? Isn't it valuable to cause people to believe what's true? So we want to say, even if both are right, it's not clear that the lying compliment is right at all, but even if they both were right, we'd want to say that the sincere compliment is more right.